Not the latest online delivery turning up, but the door-to-door tracking down of the South African variant.
Hi, good morning. From Woking Borough Council.
Okay.
We're doing some COVID testing today in the area.
Volunteers set off this morning in Woking, armed with maps, tests and masks. All the commotion on her street led grandmother Carmen Ferros to pop her head out of the door. She questions the new strategy.
Where we're going to be to the next march and so on.
How do you feel about the South African variant?
I feel sad, very sad indeed, because they should take a lot more precautions to make sure when people enter the country to check properly.
Her neighbour, who got letterbox testing today, is also worried about the new variant.
It's quite scary. I mean, I guess for me, like, one of our biggest concerns is, like, with the vaccine, is it going to be safe against the new variants? I mean, hopefully it will be, and that's just something that's just on our mind.
This is one of a few streets in the GU21 postcode that is going to be having this surge testing. So what does that mean? Well, volunteers are going up this street, going to every single door here and asking people whether they want to take a test. And it's all to find out whether they have got the South African variant and just to see how widespread this variant is here in the UK.
From the doorstep to Parliament, similar themes and worries about border strategy and the impact new variants will have on vaccines play out in the Commons as the Health Secretary updates on new strains found across the country.
We have also seen 11 cases of mutations of concern in Bristol and 32 in Liverpool, and are taking the same approach.
This all comes as a report revealed the strain which first emerged in Kent appears to be undergoing some new concerning mutations, similar to the South African and Brazilian variants, and shown to reduce the effectiveness of vaccines.
How worried should we be about this?
If you've immunised, say, 100 people, you may find that with this new variant, perhaps more of them may still be susceptible to infection than previously with the previous variant. However, some vaccination is better than none. Okay, so if you don't vaccinate anybody, everyone's susceptible. If you vaccinate the people against this variant, you may find only 50% of them, or 60% may be protected versus not protected. That's still better than nothing.
The concern about all these strains and variants is clear. 11 areas will be having more testing, like here in Walsall, where mobile drive-in units try to get more people in the area. Back in Woking, door knocking continues as volunteers drop off more tests. Rather than feeling like we've come to the end of the COVID road, residents here describe this to me as a big unwelcome bump.
Now, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced new quarantine measures that go well beyond those of the UK government. Addressing the Scottish Parliament today, she said anyone coming from anywhere outside the UK will have to isolate in a hotel for a fortnight. But she also outlined plans for schools to begin reopening from February 22nd, earlier than in England. From Glasgow, our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, reports.
Not so much how to check in as how to get into Scotland. Well, please don't, says the First Minister. Pushing restrictions further than the UK government, you'll soon face managed quarantine coming into Scotland from any country outside the UK. The UK government wants that, but only for anyone travelling from a prohibited listed country.
It is essential that we also guard against fresh importation of cases from overseas. This is particularly important as the virus mutates and new, more infectious and potentially more severe variants emerge. And as we look ahead, we must learn from past experience.
But what about those people who might simply come into English airports and head north to Scotland by road? Well, on that, Nicola Sturgeon said her government would try to persuade the UK government to follow her lead in imposing these more wide-ranging restrictions. No doubt sensing that's going to go absolutely nowhere in the current political atmosphere, she said she'd also encourage UK officials to work hard with their Scottish counterparts to make sure that nobody attempts that kind of behaviour.
The First Minister described the situation across Scotland as fragile, but said overall trends now allow for possible lifting of some lockdown measures here from the start of March. With that in mind, there'll be a review on schools in a fortnight, with plans announced today for preschool and early years pupils to go back full-time from February the 22nd, and for senior pupils to go back for some vital face-to-face sessions from that date. Major changes, but the first questions in response were all about the row that won't go away, the rate of Scotland's vaccination programme. Ruth Davidson won't let it go.
At the moment, all the evidence shows the Scottish Government's rollout is slow, stuttering and lagging way behind the rest of the UK. While we saw record highs elsewhere this weekend, on Sunday, Scotland saw the lowest number of JAGs administered since the start of the mass rollout over a month ago.
Cue yet more repeated explanation from Nicola Sturgeon that when you concentrate on care homes first, the rollout of jabs to the wider population will be slower. A wider population, which the polls show, rates the Scottish Government's handling of the pandemic way higher than the UK Government's.
Well, that row just ratcheted up tonight. Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, writing on behalf of the UK Government to Nicola Sturgeon and saying, Scotland, we're offering you help in your hour of need. And I quote, it's in everyone's interest that the vaccination of the people of Scotland matches the best efforts of the rest of the UK. We want you to accelerate what you're doing, he says, to accelerate the rollout of your programme. Well, this, you don't need me to tell you, will be greeted as an exercise in cynical politics at best by the Scottish Government. Privately, there'd be a good deal ruder than that, and it will be seen as dripping with condescension about this row, which will not go away and will likely feature as a major issue in the coming elections here in May. Back to you.
Alex Thompson in Glasgow. Now, there has been some encouraging news today on the vaccines front. Our Health and Social Care editor, Victoria MacDonald, has the latest. Victoria.
Yes, John, some new early data released today that comes with some caveats, but it's on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and it shows that it offers 76% protection against COVID-19 up to 12 weeks after a single dose. 2 doses even better, they say it's more than 82% effective. Now, this will, of course, offer an awful lot of reassurance over the decision in this country to delay that second dose by 3 months. In effect, what they're saying is that anywhere between 4 weeks to 12 weeks is fine. But also, and this is what we've been waiting for too, this data suggests the vaccine may reduce transmission of the virus by 67%. Now, this, of course, is critical because at the moment, all we know really for any of the vaccines is that they are effective against serious disease and hospitalisation. There were suspicions that they would prevent transmission, but we needed the data in order to quite simply make people feel safer. So really positive news. France today authorised this vaccine 4 days after the European Medicines Agency, but they have actually, along with Italy, Austria and Germany, said it should only be given to those aged under 65 because of what they say is a lack of data on older people. This is actually disputed by the authorities here and the Oxford AstraZeneca team. And just one more piece of vaccine news, it's Russia's Sputnik vaccine. Still early data of the phase 3 trial that was released today in The Lancet. It would appear that their vaccine is 91.6% effective against COVID-19 with no serious adverse events.
Victoria, thanks very much. Well, joining me now is Professor Ravi Gupta, one of the scientists advising the government on new and emerging virus threats. He's been studying how effective the Pfizer vaccine is against these latest mutations. Professor Gupta, some very positive news from Victoria there. What can you tell us about how effective the Pfizer jab is on these new variants coming through?
So the Pfizer vaccine, as you know, was the first to be used in the UK. And so it gave us an opportunity to study immune responses, as well as to test the efficacy of sera isolated from people on new variants. So what we found is that when we test the B117 variant by making artificial viruses and mixing them with antibodies from people who've been vaccinated.
And just explain what that variant is.
Yes, the B117 variant, which is the UK variant that's now accounting for 80% of new infections. So this new variant has 8 mutations in its spike protein relative to the previously circulating strain. And so when we mix that virus with the serum and antibodies from people vaccinated, we found that it was around 2 to 3-fold less sensitive, which means that we needed to add 2 or 3 times more antibody or serum to achieve the same amount of blockade of the virus. So that's a very small amount. That's a modest amount when you consider the amount of antibody there.
So is the Pfizer vaccine now being adjusted? So any vaccines rolling out now will be more effective on that strain, or is it not quite that simple?
Well, the companies are involved actively in redesigning or modifying vaccines to account for some of the major emerging variants. For example, with mutations in the spike protein, we know the ones we're looking for because they're emerging again and again. And as you reported earlier, there is the UK variant now showing signs of having acquired one of the key mutations seen in the South African and Brazilian variants.
And that new mutation, do you know how effective the Pfizer jab is on these new ones coming through now? You know the previous Kent variant, but can you tell us any more about how effective it's likely to be on mutations coming through now?
Well, we've tested around 12 individuals who've been vaccinated against this new newly mutated virus with the 484 mutation on top of the 8 spike mutations. And we found somewhat worryingly, but not surprisingly, that this time it's more like 9 or 10-fold more antibody needed to achieve the same amount of neutralization of the virus. So the virus is a little bit less sensitive to our antibodies, as expected, because we know that the South African and Brazilian variants are less sensitive. So not surprising, but slightly worrying.
So is it only a matter of time before a mutation happens which sort of escapes the vaccines entirely, in which case is going for total elimination of COVID the only policy option now?
Well, I think this is a warning sign. We've now seen these key mutations arising again and again in diverse locations, suggesting the virus has chosen and favored routes to overcoming our immune responses. And we need to be a step ahead. We need to think smartly. We do need to redesign vaccines that are not targeting spike, but also the ones that are targeting spike need to be modified to accommodate these mutations. And we can do that.
But if you redesign the vaccines, that's going to take a little bit of time. In the meantime, do you shut the borders entirely or do what Scotland's doing and quarantine everybody coming in?
It's a really good question. And I think that given that transmission is still so high and there is a risk of new variants being imported and setting up chains of infection, that the current measures seem to be appropriate, but they shouldn't be indefinite and they should be monitored and reviewed regularly. And I can imagine that what I would like to see is the next tranche of vaccines being available by something like September, October this year in time for the next potential wave.
Professor Ravi Gupta, thanks very much for joining us. John.
Thank you.